I'm Graham Darlow and I'm the chair of the Safety Charter Steering Group, and we've just held our meeting, which we do every quarter. I'm also Chief Executive of Fletcher Construction, and I'm delighted that Fletcher Construction is able to sponsor tonight's event. I'm really pleased with the agenda too. We've got some really good, engaging speakers and lots of information to present. To start with this afternoon, we've got Kelvin Smith. Kelvin is Deputy Chief Executive of Corporate Services at Sarah, and Kelvin will talk us through where we're at in the progress of the rebuild. I'm sure many of you will be very keen to hear this information, as while we're all focused on our own individual projects, it's great to get a sense of the wider Canterbury rebuild project. Later on, Cos Bruin, someone I know really well from Downer, the Managing Director, will speak to us about safety culture and what safety leadership means to him. Following Cos, we'll hear from Rob Sloan. Rob is the chair of the Leadership Working Group, and he'll provide some important research the Charter has commissioned through Worksafe and what will come out of it. And to finish, we'll officially welcome our new signatories, as we normally do. So it's just over 6 months ago that we celebrated our 100th signatory. After today, we'll have 156 signatories and 36 endorsees, taking it to 192. We're nearly at the 200 mark, and this afternoon we've been talking about an initiative that will gather a whole lot more signatories as time progresses. At today's steering group meeting, we also agreed with each of the steering group members who would make a commitment to engage with at least 10 new organisations to sign up, and that'll significantly increase our membership. We'd encourage all of you actually to do the same. There are many subcontractors and small contracting businesses, tradies and others that will really benefit from their participation in the Charter. We're finding through our surveys and feedback that it's the smaller and medium-sized firms that are getting the most benefit of their membership. We'll be continuing to work on our website, and those that have been into the website recently, I think it's just fantastic. I love going in there and I love referring people to it as well. And we've had some interesting data on the number of people accessing the website with an average time of 4 minutes, which is pretty stunning for a website, that each person has going into the website. We haven't taken a break since we last met in December. In fact, there's been quite a bit to report. In January, you'll all have received an email asking you to complete the revised assessment tool. This is based on the self-awareness tool that many of you would have completed last year, and it's been improved and is now much easier to complete with online. There's also a very comprehensive guide to help you through the tool, and some of you are still ready to complete the tool. If you haven't, please do so as soon as possible. The feedback is really important to us, and that's how we plan and improve what we're providing under the Charter. Not only is this information useful to you to measure where you are at in meeting your Charter commitments, it helps us identify where you need more support to meet your Charter commitments. And certainly one area that we've identified is through fatigue and to a lesser extent impairment, and we've had a great discussion more recently today because we were asked by Worksafe to provide some anecdotal evidence on where we think the focus needs to be. And as these lovely buildings rise out of the city, we can see, and through our own experiences, that falling from height will become a critical issue over time, and so that's been listened to loud and clear. So each of the, we've also launched the second phase of our critical risks campaign. This now includes posters and toolbox talks in the remaining critical areas of confined spaces, of hot works, electricity, and workplace violence. So thanks to Worksafe for funding this major piece of work, and thanks to Hirepool, who've paid for putting a lot of the posters in the portaloos that are around the city. The campaign will continue through until June. As well, there's been a lot going on behind the scenes in the steering group and working groups. We've been working hard to nail down a program plan for 2015. It looks a pretty busy program to me, and I'm pleased to say the steering group has approved that this afternoon. So for the next few months, we're going to expect to see from us much more on the theme of leadership. Rob Sloan will later be talking to you about this, but one of the key outputs will be the leadership tools to help us improve in this area across levels of our business. And of course, COS will be addressing that as well. The Performance Working Group will be working on a template to improve you identifying the areas of the Charter that you're going to focus on in the next 6 months as part of your Charter assessment work. And from mid-year, the Communications Working Group will be looking to start a campaign for workers around fatigue and drug and alcohol impairment. This will follow on in the critical risks. What we've decided is to bring forward the work on fatigue given the survey information that we've had. As you may have read in last month's newsletter, we're about to recruit for a Charter project office to support a support worker who will provide understanding of the Charter and of health and safety, and we'll look forward to we'll look to keep improving the website with an online sign-up tool, and also the development of a sign-in area where we can share a wider number of documents and information with other signatories. And we'll look to continue to hold workshops which have gone down really well in the city, including safety planning workshop in several months. In last month's newsletter, you may have also read about the steering group's decision to implement a membership funding scheme to the Charter. That will provide us a much more sustainable financial model to keep the Charter going on into the future. Just remember, we get really well supported from Worksafe and by ACC, and that's enabled us to produce all the tools and all the collateral that we've done. All the other participants, the industry participants and others, are giving their time for free. But it's that support of the Secretariat and the collateral that makes it so effective. Much of the work to date has been funded by Worksafe, and while both agencies will continue to fund some of the larger Charter projects into the future, we still need annual contributions from the signatories to be able to continue our program. And so the funding from the participating signatory companies will depend on the size of the organisations, but it'll be $50 a year, I think, for the very small companies, up to about $3,000 a year for the largest ones. I believe industry funding will allow the Charter to continue providing leadership and resources to grow the health and safety capacity and capability. And we have committed to a very comprehensive work program in 2015. That'll extend into 2015, and I hope, like me, you will see a significant value from your membership of the Charter. I've briefly touched on the new role of the Charter Project Officer, which we'll be recruiting shortly. This is really exciting. The role has come out of discussions with the steering group and has been had and led by the Council of Trade Unions, particularly with Helen Kelly and Worksafe New Zealand. We think worker participation is one of the key parts of the Charter, and this role will not only support worker understanding of the Charter, which we believe is pretty low, but also the health and safety across the rebuild, and it'll complement the work of the Charter senior leaders. As well as visiting construction sites to discuss and raise awareness of the Charter Project Officer will encourage workers to participate in a survey to gauge employee participation in health and safety, involvement by health and safety representatives on site, and the worker views on general site health and safety. The Charter Project Officer role will be contracted by the Council of Trade Unions and will be based in the Safe Rebuild Canterbury offices. Before I finish this afternoon, I also want to mention something very relevant to you all. Through the Business Leaders Health and Safety Forum, which I'm a member, there is a 2-day development series being offered as part of the safety leadership development. It's practical and it's aimed at CEOs or managing directors and general managers who might be getting ready to move into a CEO role, and will explore 8 powerful practices senior executives can use to improve in their safety in their workplaces. If you'd like more information, we've got Francis Martin. Francis putting a hand up at the back. You'll be in the foyer at the end, Francis, and you've got quite a number of brochures on the training program. Now, for next I have the pleasure of introducing Kelvin Smith, Deputy Chief Executive of Corporate Services at Sarah. Kelvin also sits on the Charter Steering Group. I know many of you are keen to hear an update on exactly where we are in the rebuild and the progress we're making collectively. So please welcome Kelvin.
Oh, good evening, everyone. It's great to see such a big turnout. As Graham said, what I'd like to do is give you a sense of how we see the total picture of the rebuild and the recovery proceeding. And because often it's you might know what's going on in your own areas, but not necessarily see the bigger picture as we do. As Graham said, I work at Sarah, so I look after the Corporate Services Group, which encompasses the HR function, IT and finance. And amongst the IT group, I've got a corporate health and safety team, so that's what brings me into contact really with the safety charter group. But I've also got another group called the Strategic Procurement and Performance Group. Now, what this group is primarily focused on is the total public sector rebuild, because while within Sarah we've got the Central City Development Unit with a number of projects, but the government is also putting in a whole lot of money in rebuild projects across a number of its agencies. And so we've been charged with monitoring and coordinating that and reporting on their progress, which I'll come to in a little bit more detail. But we've got a number of groups within this strategic procurement and performance, and this is the group that's generating the sort of information I'll talk about now. So we start out with procurement. So we've had a specialist team working for some time, particularly focused on the public sector rebuild, giving specialist procurement advice, because what we're trying to do is give the agencies advice, not just looking at their own agency, but giving them advice and information about what's going on across the rebuild as a whole, and particularly in the public sector. And so some of that looks at whether there can be good sort of generic performance practices across all the agencies. And a good example might be that if we can observe where groups might be going out to procurement at the same time, we can give advice whether that's a good idea. So we give them the big picture. On the performance side, as I said, we're reporting on the public sector rebuild program, and we do that through a variety of means and gathering market intelligence, and also sort of monitoring risk and issues. And the output of that group, one of the big outputs, is a quarterly report on the public sector rebuild that goes up to joint ministers. That's the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Economic Development, and the Minister of for Canterbury Earthquake Recovery. So that's giving them a sense of how the public sector rebuild's progressing. And that's designed to give insights and inform ministers and the individual agencies how the thing's tracking, so that if there's any issues in mitigating, they can put in mitigating actions. But before I get on to some of the information we've got at our hands, I just need to there's always disclaimers, particularly when you work for the government. The figures we've got here are based on data that was September 2014. Now you might say, well, gee, that's a long time ago, but we're in the process at the moment of doing the quarterly report based on the end of December, so it takes a little while to bring together. And the data in the quarterly report, for various reasons, we need to actually give that to ministers first before it's made public. So there's a mixture of actuals up to September 2014 and a little bit of modelling. So with the modelling, that's based on a set of assumptions, and so it's a continuous work in progress. So it's based on the most recent data with a little bit of modelling and analysis thrown in. And always, given the scale and complexity of the rebuild program, the trends and the figures will change. So all we'd say is don't rely totally on the figures, and always do your own due diligence. So that's my disclaimer. Just looking at the agenda, so what we'll cover is, I'll give you a bit of a sense of the size of the rebuild, although I prefer to use the word recovery because recovery in total is not just about construction. We'll have a bit of a look at some cost breakdown, where we think we are today, where we're heading, and then just a little bit more focus on the actual public sector rebuild. Sorry, that one. So the big number, which we call the total cost of recovery. So for some time we've thought that's around about $40 billion. So that's quite a big number. Now one of our analysts, when you deal with big numbers you can get a little bit desensitised to it. So one of our analysts always reminds me, he said, look, if you want to know the difference between a million and a billion, it takes you 12 days to count to a million. Okay? That's if you don't lose count. He said, how long do you think it takes to count to a billion? Anyone know? 32 years. So that's the difference in scale when we're talking about a million and a billion. So 40 billion's a big number. And conservatively, it's around about 20% of the annual GDP or 60% of Crown tax revenue in 13-14. So in anyone's figure. So the question is that likely to increase? It's possibly, because really things change over time and costs do escalate. But so it's really a statistical model based on the best information. So it's our best estimate at the moment. So I'll flick through that. So thinking about the impact on construction activity, what we're observing then, the red bars, that was business as usual. So that was the normal levels of construction activity in Canterbury. And you can see that probably about 2007, it was running at $600 million a quarter. And you can see there was a dip for obvious reasons in 2010. And you can see the real ramping up per quarter through to the end of 2014. So there's been a threefold increase in that time. And if I show you a graph a little bit further on, you can see where that's going to peak out into about 2016. So it's a very steep increase. And the market certainly had to react accordingly and increase capacity to meet that demand. But currently, from what we're seeing, the market's grown and met that demand. So whether that keeps going, we're not sure. But at the moment, the signs are pretty positive. So thinking about that total cost of recovery, that 40 billion, within that, we're thinking about 30 billion of that's construction. Okay, so there's a big concentration. So what makes up that 10 billion variance? Well, there's insurance settlements not related to construction in that. So things like contents, business interruption insurance is included in that. And there's some other costs, Crown other recovery costs like land acquisition and some administration costs. And then there's things like construction not requiring building consent. So out of that 40 billion, we think the 30 billion is probably the number that's flowing through into construction. So how's that 30 billion broken down? So we see that residential is, we think, it's about 11 billion, and then heavy commercial 8 billion, light commercial 5 billion, and then the civil construction, which is about 6 billion. So you can see between the heavy and light commercial, that's sort of up matching just a little bit ahead of the 11 billion residential. So just defining how we've broken that up, which is probably reasonably obvious. So residential is private dwellings and social housing. Heavy commercial projects greater than 10 million, both public and private. So that, for example, the Justice and Emergency Services Precinct. The light commercial is commercial projects of under 10 million. That's both private and public. An example of that would be something like the Hallsville Library. And then the civil is the horizontal infrastructure work and other utilities, things like Port of Littleton and some of the City Council public space. So the work of skirt falls into the civil. So estimated completion. So our information is telling us that residential is about 33% on the way through. So you remember that figure of out of the there was 11 billion out of the 30. So we think that's about a third of the way through. Heavy commercial hasn't started out of the blocks as quickly, so we think that's about 15% through. Light commercial, we're thinking that's about 31%, and then the civil is 39%. So what that indicates at 15% that heavy commercial is really in the early stages of the rebuild, and obviously the civil via skirt, which started a lot earlier, they're the furthest ahead. Now this graph's an interesting one, it's a variation of the one I showed you before. So again, the red line is the business as usual activity. So, and the blue is all earthquake related. So you can see the dominating effect of construction activity in the area as a result of the earthquake. And you can see the peak is around about the mid of 2016, but then it's only a gradual decline. So the business as usual activity certainly reduced as a result of the earthquakes and as the earthquake recovery gathers pace. So obviously the rebuild's driving significant demand on supply, as I said before, and we think that peak is going to occur. And bear in mind, this graph here is an aggregated graph. So if you think about each of the different categories, the peak's going to occur between 2014 and 2017. So when we think about that in the context of the Canterbury Rebuild Safety Charter, and we discussed it at our steering group today, in a lot of ways we're only at the start of the journey. While some groups are further advanced, we're still at the start. So there's still plenty of opportunity to have more people sign up to the charter, and there's still a lot of earthquake recovery work to go. So the work of the Rebuild Safety Charter is still as relevant as ever, and it's going to be for many years to come. Now this is just another way of looking at that same graph, and this breaks it down by year by those categories. So you can see the peak in the activity and construction is expected to occur between 14 and 17. So the civil works slowing from about 2017, and the residential slowing from about 2017. So that's when we predict 95% of the EQ claims will be settled by. So just to interpret that graph for you, so the red at the top of the boxes is the residential, and you can see down below the purple, that's when the heavy commercial kicks in a little bit later, but reaches a peak around 17, 18 and then starts to drop away. So, so that gives you a really good idea how those various categories will be flowing through that peak. And I always like to give a little bit of plug for Skirt, and our colleague Ian Campbell's in the audience. So, and this is a real success story, I believe. So if we look at the information coming from their website, and it's a great website, you can go on there and track the progress. So it gives you information that really keeps you up to date. So according to their website, the roads repairs about 37% complete, freshwater pipes 74%, wastewater 54%, and stormwater 52%. So great progress there. I just thought I'd throw this up, and this homes down a little bit onto just the central city, because I think there's a lot of debate goes on about anchor projects and some of the sort of plan in there, and so it's often easy for people to lose sight of just what this is all about. The blueprint was created from the Share an Idea program, and our group in Sarah was charged to come up with another number of other groups, 100 days to come up with the blueprint, and it came up with the concept of a shrunken city core based around 5 precincts. And so you can see there that in the blue is the Sarah-led projects. In the red, in the middle is the retail precincts, which is private sector led. And I just can't read my own writing here. And then there's in the orange there's the Sarah and City Council led, because the City Council's got a big role to play in terms of the anchor projects as well. So you can see across the city there's a lot of areas designated for the projects, and in amongst that there's also a lot of private sector development going on, because everywhere you go in the city now there's new buildings sort of popping out of the ground, particularly down what's referred to as the west core along the west side of the Avon. So there's still a lot of activity to come. I just want to move now on to the public sector rebuild itself. Now we do monitor as much as we can what's going on in the private sector, and what that's really doing is giving us the context for what's going on with the public sector rebuild. So the expected cost of the public sector rebuild, and this is the money the government's funneling into the rebuild of various aspects in Canterbury, is around about that 8 billion mark. And that's coming through organisations like the Canterbury District Health Board, the City Council, Selwyn District Council, Ministry of Education, because remembering the Ministry of Education are embarking on this major schools redevelopment program over 10 years, Lincoln University with their hub, Ministry of Justice, which with the Justice and Emergency Services Precinct, Sarah's obviously with their anchor projects in the central city, Ministry of Health, well, the Ministry of Health and the Canterbury District Health Board are both pouring lots of money in terms of the redevelopment of the hospital. The Transport Agency with their road program, Waimak Council, the university's on a big program out there. Housing New Zealand are doing a lot of rebuilding of houses and new stock, and CPIT and Littleton Port Company. So you can see there's a lot of agencies involved in projects and spending government-funded money on rebuild and recovery. Now that $8 billion I'm talking about actually excludes skirts, so that's quite separate. Now these are the agencies that the team I talked about at the start, the Strategic Performance and Procurement team, are liaising with closely to really just understand and track their progress and work with their procurement teams. So if we just look at the sort of relative size of it, the Sarah CCDU side makes up 15%, and then you can see the sliding scale. So there's still some big numbers here. The Ministry of Education Schools program sitting at 13% of that, and then Littleton Port Company's a big one, so is the university. So you can see the relative size of those. So the largest agencies really are Sarah, Ministry of Education, Littleton Port, University, NZTA, which is the roads, Ministry of Health, and of course the City Council. So the City Council's again a big player. So just looking at that graph, a different version of the graph, this is the public sector rebuild, and it really mirrors that other graph about where we expect the peak activity. So you see that starts to ramp up radically in the second quarter in 2014, and then the peak of that public sector rebuild is going to be across 2015 and 16, and then start to fall off around 2017. Now the two peaks really are due to this differing start dates on some major construction projects, in terms of the timing of that. So that gives you a bit of a sense of, okay, that's where that $8 billion is going to be spread. So again, there's quite a long tail of that out to about 2022. So projects completing in 2015. If you've been down Litchfield Street past the Justice and Emergency Services Precinct, you'll see the bus interchange coming out of the ground. Now that's due for completion at the end of next month and being handed over in May. So hopefully we'll start to see some buses coming through there. The east frame, which I'm not sure how familiar you are with the blueprint, but the east frame's that area between Manchester Street and Madras Street. And that's really the public realm where the Crown's bought a lot of land to create a boulevard and green spaces and public spaces. And that's also going to be complemented by a residential housing development, which will obviously take a lot longer, but we expect that public realm part to be finished this year. The art gallery is expected to be finished this year. Oh, better move that on. And through housing, there's a range of new builds and repairs going on as well. So projects expected to be starting this year is the Earthquake Memorial, the Convention Centre, the Central Library, and the... should keep pressing this, shouldn't I? The Convention Centre, the Central Library, and the Acute Services Building at the hospital. So all in all, a heck of a lot of activity going on now and a heck of a lot of activity in the pipeline. The program of work, which is the full public sector program of work, is on our website, and we update that every quarter. It was last updated at Christmas, and we expect that to be updated just after Easter because our team's going through that work at the moment, talking to all the agencies. And it's based on information the agencies give us about each project and their expected timelines for start-up, construction and completion. So I'd urge you to all go and have a look at that website and just understand sort of when things are coming on stream. So really that's a little bit about where we see the big picture of the rebuild. There's lots and lots of projects. There's a lot of projects in planning and have yet to go to procurement, so they'll be coming on stream over, as you can see that peak we were saying is going between 14 and 17, depending on the nature of the category of construction.
I guess when we talk safety, we quite quickly move into terms like lost time injury frequency rate and total reportable injury frequency rate and severity frequency rate. But I guess behind those figures there are some very real impacts on real people and families. And, we've got to look beyond their numbers. When something bad happens, such as fatality, the impacts on the people involved and the impacts on the family are forever. And in some cases, when a family loses their main income earner, the consequences for that family can be, extremely devastating. Look, safety it's not a game. When something goes wrong, you can't press the rewind button, and all you can do is pick up the pieces. So, why is safety important to me? So what's this picture all about? We had an employee called Graham Brown, and he was a driller and worked for Downer for 39 years. And I last talked to Graham. His ambition was to get to that 40 years service and then retire. Graham was regarded by his peers as a master driller. He'd worked all around New Zealand on some iconic projects like Signatories and also Antarctica. Graham was fatally injured on a Downer work site on the 19th of October 2012 while clearing a rock slide on the Milford Road. So long story short, Graham was hit on the side of his hard hat by a hose clamp which flew off when there was a catastrophic failure of an air hose. The crew on site did all they can to save Graham, but unfortunately he passed away at the site. So the people you see pictured here are Angela and Richard, and they're Graham's adult children. What you don't see in the picture is more than 50 direct family members of Graham and workmates who unveiled a plaque on the site that Graham was fatally injured a year after his death. I'm absolutely humbled by the way that Graham's wife Liz coped with the accident and the way that the family coped with the accident. But it's not always the case, I guess when you as a leader of your business have to front up to a family and explain why a loved one is not coming home, or explain why that loved one is in a hospital with life-threatening injuries, and as a leader you should. How comfortable would you feel talking to his family, to their family? And let me assure you, for everyone involved, it's a far from pleasant experience. And from my experience, it was one that will stay with you for the rest of your life. Last year, 75 families experienced the situation of a loved one not coming home. And the building and construction industry basically contributed significantly to those stats. So look, the bottom line, in my opinion, is everyone does deserve to go home safe and sound after the end of each work shift. And that is why safety means a lot to me as a leader of my business. So how do I lead safety at Downer? I always like to personalise safety in my business. And, we always say, how comfortable would you be with your children working on the work sites under your control? And just remember that, the other people working on those work sites are other people's children. And, I think that's the way you should think about safety and safety performance. There are people behind those, there are real people behind those numbers, and the impacts are real on those people. So, safety is as important as profit. And I'm sure that if not today, safety will be a ticket to operate. Downer operates a lot in the mining sector, and if you don't have certain safety standards and certain safety performance, you will not even be allowed to price the work. So, safety is a licence to operate. Therefore, it must be first on every meeting agenda. I guess I've got a very large business, over 5,000 employees, so how do you get the message out consistently across such a wide audience, and how do you get it out to the front line in a way that you want to get the message to be understood? So we use monthly videos, and we have, first things first, we have a safety moment on the video, and we share good stories and we share bad stories. So, pictured are my fingers, and I'm a pretty avid woodworker. I guess I use it most of the time for de-stressing. I've built most of my own furniture over the years. On a Sunday morning, I suspect I didn't have my mind on the job, wasn't using the right tools, and I chopped the tip of my finger off. So this is what I fronted up to my business with. Yep, I'm just like you, I'm human like everyone else. I sit on my soapbox and preach safety, and yet I've done the same stupid things as some other people. So really had to eat my own safety medicine in that situation. So I think, the real key learnings that I guess out of that thing is safety is not something that just happens at work. You don't just turn up at work, turn on your safety switch, and it'll all be okay. Safety is as important at home, and the reality is there are more people injured at home than there are in the workplace in New Zealand. So, safety is ever present, and I guess that's a bit contrary to some of the Kiwi psyche, but it has to change. And when you run a multiple crews or a large business, I guess it's really important that you get, I think basically you have to trust other people to do the job. But in my business, you've got to trust, but you also got to verify. And occasionally you as a leader have got to get out and you've actually got to see for your own eyes what's really going on. You've got to ask the questions, you've got to observe, and essentially you've got to use your judgment and experience. So, the numbers are one thing, but you really have to visit the site to see what's really going on. When accidents happen, it's really important that you try and understand or find out why those accidents really happen, or find the root cause. It's not a blame apportioning exercise, and invariably you do find something, and when you do find that root cause or root causes, then you've got to get that messages out to your business and get it out quickly. And there's always something you can learn and apply and do differently. Once you've done that, I guess you've also got to make sure that whatever corrective action you've requested is actually implemented in the field and followed up. So what gets managed gets measured. This is a quick graph of the safety stats of the Downer skirt team. And, so stats I think are very good for monitoring trends. And this is an example where with Downer, the Downer skirt team had the worst safety performance of all the skirt teams, and an unacceptable performance, I might add. So with a bit of focus, the team turned it around. So those figures are now first equal in terms of safety performance. So that took a lot of hard work, and some of the key things that we really implemented are really on this slide here. So who really drives safety performance? Is safety performance related to the number of safety professionals we employ? If we employ more safety professionals, will we get a better safety result? Well, certainly my experience that's not the case. And I have a view that the more safety professionals you have, the more backside wiping that happens in your business. They do make a difference, and they are an important part of the team. But the reality is that safety must be owned by operations. And if you want to create lasting and improving safety figures in your business, then operations must own safety on their sites. I think it's really important that the frontline leaders, the foremen, supervisors, the engineers who are actually on the site, drive safety on their sites. If you don't have their buy-in, if they don't think it's important, well then nothing's going to change. So and in the SCIRT team, that was a key driver, and they really took ownership and made a difference. Look, there are many risks on our sites. You know, sometimes you can count, 10s, 20, 30 different types of risk, but not all risks are equal. And I think the real focus has got to go on managing those critical risks. What are those risks that if we don't get right, it could lead to a significant or serious injury or worse? Now take, for example, in our business or any roadworks sort of business, you've always got a lot of people and plant and reversing vehicles. So I guess some people might think, okay, PPE, make sure everyone wears a day-glow jacket. Well, I guess that does make a difference in terms of the ability for people to see the person, but it is an absolute last line of defence only. And the same with Graham's hard hat, That was his last line of defence and it didn't save him. So, you've got to think about, okay, reversing vehicles, what can we do? How can we engineer the process or plan the way we do the work such that we don't need to reverse trucks? Or we can keep people away from the plant. Now, we've found with good planning and with the involvement of the team, invariably, in most cases, you can remove the need for reversing vehicles. Or if you can't do that, at least that process is tightly controlled. So planning makes all the difference. I think safety messages, safe work practices, procedures, I think a lot of our safety professionals like to convince us how smart they are, and they write these huge sort of safety procedures. And I've seen in my business one that's over 80 pages long. Now, I'm not going to read an 80-page safe work statement, and I don't expect my people to. One of the key things the Downer crew did on the SCIRT project was produce a whole lot of 101 guides to how we do cable location, how we do other things. And they are very much pictorial based, and they're written in a way that our front line can read them and understand them. And that's made a huge difference. So, I guess the old principle, keep it simple, is really applies in the safety sense. I guess safety for me is integral to the way that we plan and price work. It's not something that we think about later, And, in all our businesses, we do a lot of stuff day in, day out. And we do it in multiple parts of the business. And I think the challenge for our business and for everyone else's business is to get some consistency in the way we do those things. And when we get consistency in the way we do things, it also incorporates all the smart ideas from around the business, and also incorporates how we can do the job safely. And I think when you've got that nailed, you can call that operational excellence. And operational excellence to me is that you do the job right the first time and you do it safely and the customer's happy with the result, on time, to quality and to the right standards. And this will be a lot easier for us to train too, If this is the procedure, it's very easy for people to be trained to that procedure. Look, above anything else, don't leave anything to chance. You've got to look after your staff. And all I ask you to do, go out to your work sites and make a difference. So thank you.
Okay, Rob Sloan sits with us on the steering group, but also he's chair of the leadership working group. And this particular working group has done great things in the last year, and they've got some good things planned for the future. So, Rob, over to you.
Thanks, Graham. Good evening, everybody. I'm Rob Sloan, GM of Genuine Homes here in Canterbury, and as Graham said, I'm also chair of the Charters Leadership Working Group. As Graham alluded earlier, leadership is a big theme for the Charter this year, and it's great to have some leaders here in industry and in business talking to us today, and thanks for sharing your thoughts there, guys. That was outstanding. Leadership's a key Charter priority, and it's something that we've all agreed to when we've signed the Charter. Last year, the working group commissioned research into leadership, and this presentation is going to just run through it briefly. We want to look at why we commissioned the research, what we asked the researchers to do, what they found, and what we're looking to do in the Charter to improve Rebuild's health and safety leadership. Leadership is one of the three priorities, along with the Charter performance and the communication of the steering group. And this is why we have formal working groups focused in this area. The Leadership Working Group is focused on providing useful tools to improve the health and safety leadership at all operational levels of the rebuild, including director, senior, middle, team leader, supervisor, worker and contractor, and that includes subcontractors and hired labour. The research was commissioned in part because we wanted to better understand the current health and safety leadership practice that we use in the rebuild at the moment and in the construction industry nationally, not just in Canterbury. But we also wanted to understand better what the gaps are and where we have the gaps in leadership knowledge and practice. So having this understanding, it will support the development of tools to improve health and safety leadership as we look to lift the level of leadership to good and on to excellent. The researchers we engaged was a group led by SiteSafe, and that included Dr. Kyle McWilliams and support from the Auckland University of Technology. The report published today on the Charter website examines what leadership looks like across the rebuild, and it provides a matrix of effective health and safety leadership based on the research at these 5 levels. So the background to the research was informed by a survey with 30% of the Charter signatories responding to this. 2 focus group sessions were run of senior management, supervisors, workers, contractors and subcontractors. We also had in-depth interviews of 4 senior rebuild leaders. A literature review of international and local research on the subject of health and safety leadership was also used, and some desktop research into existing training and learning development providers within the Canterbury region. So what was produced? As well as the main report, the findings from the research led to the production of 3 case studies from Fowler Homes, Skirt and Fletcher's, and the Fletcher's work was via the Business Leaders Health and Safety Forum that Graham referred to earlier, and we thank them for that. The development of a leadership matrix outlining what health and safety leadership looks like at the 5 operational levels based on the research. And again, these 5 levels are directors or owners, senior managers, supervisors, workers, contractors and subcontractors. And I'll show you the matrix shortly. It's a fantastic document, and I encourage you all to go on the website and check this matrix out in more detail. We believe this matrix will be the basis for really, really great tools for us to work from. Very, very practical, and it'll cover everyone on site, everyone, as we're recognising everyone has a leadership role to play. It's not just senior and owner and director, it's right down through to the worker. Leadership exists at all those levels. So what was said, what came back? The responses from the participants in the interviews and workshops indicated that a consistent understanding of what effective health and safety leadership should be across all levels, roles and perspectives. Common themes emerged, both from interviews and the literature review. Visibility, accountability, being involved, hands-on, realistic and achievable measures, and the importance of creating a health and safety culture. Health and safety leadership training is lacking, and either it's lacking or it's ineffective at all operational levels. So that's really, really important. It's a huge gap. While some organisations exhibit great health and safety leadership, it's also apparent that there's, again, significant gaps right across the industry. So that's very hard to see. That's the matrix I mentioned. And again, as I said, it's been published on the website, and I encourage you all to go on and have a look at it and familiarise yourself with it. Has come out of the research report, And again, it covers those 5 levels across those different columns. You can't see it here in detail. There's a lot of information on this one page, and it's extremely useful. And the Leadership Working Group is now commissioning more work to turn it into something practical that we can all use, and we'll describe what that is. That next slide is just one breakdown. That's the supervisor part, and again, it's impossible to read from where you are. But it's colour-coded. There's 3 little colour codes on the right-hand side, and they represent accountability, visibility, and measurable activities or outputs. So you can actually see what's detailed down in your section and understand where you kind of need to be to help that leadership develop in your business. So, what did the research conclude? This definition was put together, and you can read it there for yourselves. And the real important thing there, it's the definition of health and safety leadership for every level of the industry, from worker right through to CEO. And we think the definition is pretty spot on. But again, you know, as charter signatories, we'd be really keen to hear your feedback on this. But again, those 3 main things: the commitment, the attribute, and importantly, the behaviours. So what is an effective safety leader? We know that leadership drives culture, and culture drives performance. So what the report finds is effective safety leaders demonstrate these following things. Effective safety leaders are visible with their exemplary behaviour. They provide clear expectations of the vision, safety procedures, and behaviours. They empower people. They educate people, and they do that through coaching and mentoring. They monitor safety performance. And again, Cos talked about verification, and how many charter events have we had where verification, we hear it all the time. It's cool to have all your processes and systems in place, but if you're not looking backwards and verifying that they're actually being practiced, well, kind of what's the point? Accountability is something that comes out very, very important. And communicating safety all the time. Demonstrating that safety is a value, and then participating in events such as the Charter and other industry activities. You've got to have active involvement. If you're a leader, you want to be seen to be involved, and bring your people with you. So again, these behaviours are grouped into 3 key areas, which are visibility, accountability, and measurement. So the Leadership Work Program, we've kind of looked at, we've got a very, very full program, as Graham's discussed, and part of this is prioritising developing key tools that are going to sort of answer some of these questions around engagement. Why should I care about health and safety leadership? How am I performing as a health and safety leadership? What are my measurements? And then some guidance. How can I improve my health and safety leadership? So we want to develop some tools and resources to help with that. Again, it's engaging with your people. And one thing that's coming out of all the work and the research that we've provided or had provided to us is a PowerPoint presentation. And this presentation is going to be a really, really excellent resource. And you can use that in your business and in your staff meetings, and it's going to be used across all levels. So you can actually get your staff and your people and your subcontractors and talk about leadership and health and safety. And we feel that's going to be an excellent resource. It's going to be a measurement tool that, again, it'll be like the performance, the self-assessment tool that you've all done. And again, it's going to be done by Navigators Consulting, so they're the people that did the measurement tool. And again, you'll be able to measure your leadership. What does it currently look like? Where are the gaps and what you can do about it? And we'll also put some guidance together with that. So you've got the tool with a guidance document to actually take you through that and see how it works. There's new workplace health and safety legislation will come into force during 2015. Compliance with the new legislation will be a key part to the way the construction industry and charter signatories in particular approach health and safety leadership. We expect to hear more from this throughout the year on the legislation and how the charter can help your compliance. Let us know what you think of the research, the report and the matrix too. We want this to work for everybody, here to improve the health and safety for everybody on site. So now it's that time of the part of the evening where we want to welcome our new signatories that are here tonight. So can I please start by asking them to come up one by one and officially sign the charter. I'd like to congratulate Carl Taylor from Carl Taylor Homes. Carl, you can come up and sign the charter. Also Nick Smith from Nick Smith Builders. Robbie McElray from Stellar Recruitment, Steve Greening from One Geotechnical, Ben Harrow from Armitage Williams Construction, Hamish Monk from Sky High Scaffolding Limited, Dale Sutherland from Horncastle Homes, Phil Williams from StructureWise Limited, Paul Revel from Bode Architecture Limited, Bruce Hewison from Grounds and Services Limited, Morris Buckley from MK Buckley Limited Concrete Pumping, David Wilson from Sycon Ferguson Limited, Greg Davies from Scope Group, Bradley Keys from Image Projects Limited. Congratulations to you all. Can we please have a round of applause for all the new Safety Charter signatories? As well as our signatories, could we please endorse and congratulate our new endorsees, Fontaine Design and ADT Alcohol Drug Technology. So look, thanks everybody. Thanks for your commitment to health and safety and to helping us all create a legacy of a safe rebuild. We're doing a great job and it's going very, very well. That's it for tonight, but before I go, I'd just like to acknowledge Graham Darlow as chair of our steering group. Thanks, Graham, for your leadership, not only in Health and Safety New Zealand, but in the steering group. You bring a lot of passion to what we do and a lot of commitment, and you drive and chair our meetings very, very well. We get through a lot of work, so thanks, Graham. And thanks to Fletcher's also for funding tonight's event. Also, just thank to our two guest speakers tonight, Cos Bruin from Downer and Kelvin Smith from Sarah. Please stay around for a drink and a bite to eat and come and have a chat to us about any aspect of the presentations. And we look forward to seeing you all at our next event on the 10th of June. Thanks very much.